Hello everybody, my name's Morag and I'm Jeremy Norman's mother. Before I start telling you about Jeremy's life, I'd like to just thank my husband David for being a rock in the last 50 years. Without him, Jeremy wouldn't be in such a state as he is now, and we have lots of other people to thank along the way. So I'm looking forward to telling you about Jeremy's life from 1966. He was the third child in our family. We were 27 and Jeremy's sister was 13 months older than him, and his brother was 3 years and 3 weeks when Jeremy was born. And David was doing final exams, so it was quite a busy time. They were all born at home because beds were very short in Portsmouth. And Jeremy's labour was very long and the birth not very easy, and the cord was round his neck. But as it turned out later, there was a genetic mutation which explained a lot of things later. But at the time, at the birth, nobody said anything, neither the midwives nor the doctors and anybody at the clinics. But David and I knew straight away there was something wrong because of his very blonde hair and pale blue eyes and eyebrows, and also the fact that the back of his head was somewhat flattened. And it soon transpired he didn't know how to suck, for example, so it was difficult to get him to feed. But he did make progress, but he didn't sit up, and very quickly he did eventually. But we used to take him out as much as possible with the other two, of course, and try to carry on as a normal family. But eventually we moved into our new house in Gallywood in Essex. And Jeremy, of course, was still under a year old, and so he was at home all the time. He didn't sleep very well for the first few years of his life. And then he developed epilepsy, and actually the sodium valproate he was given to control his fits did actually also sedate him, and he did sleep a bit better, which benefited our whole family. But it was a more rural environment, and the children loved it, and we used to take Jeremy to Gallywood Common, and you know, it was really great. And then came the great move to Gloucestershire in 1972. David, having been very brave and bought a house, a very old house at auction, and it was the only flat garden in the village of Horsley, a very, very hilly village, and we pushed Jeremy miles and miles and miles, and it was wonderful because we actually eventually bought a wheelchair with 4 fat wheels, and we could take him on over rough ground and that. So he was introduced to the outside life. And his brother took up cycle racing in his early teens, and we used to take Jeremy along because I did refreshments for the racing fraternity. And Jeremy used to cheer in his own smiley way usually, but he did get a bit bored in time trials, watching them go past one at a time. So we settled in there, but Jeremy at 6 had no education at all, and he'd been deemed ineducable. But there was no way of getting any training for him at all, so he was at home full time at this age, which I found very difficult because by this time he was crawling around, and he had this condition called pica, whereby he eats everything in sight. He's worse some days than others, but you know, it was potentially quite dangerous, and he needed constant supervision. He couldn't be left at all. We were there 13 years, and then David, who worked for CGB, was transferred to Knutsford in Cheshire. And so I'm trying to think of the order of events. We moved up there first, actually, and before Jeremy, because we had to find a suitable place for Jeremy. We had an excellent social worker, Mike Habershaw from Manchester, and we had a phone call from Mike to say that there was a place at Stoke Park Hospital for him. And we were just aghast, really. We didn't know what to do. We thought, what a dilemma. if we turn this offer down, will we ever get the chance again when we perhaps are desperate? And so after long thought, we decided to say yes. And they said, don't come and visit him for 6 weeks. But we couldn't do that. So we had him home every weekend, and it worked out all right. And he actually settled in pretty well there, although the ward he was initially in was unsuitable. It was an upstairs ward, not suitable for non-ambulant residents, and it was pretty basic. But on the whole, his life there was good. He was there for several years. They did build a purpose-built adolescent unit all on one level, and Jeremy got a place there. And he had his own training programme, and they were really doing very well with his walking, his feeding, his toilet training. And it was a good atmosphere, and he was thriving. And he still came home every weekend from Saturday to Monday. And I must tell a little story here. We used to stop on the way, he and I, on the way back from Bristol to home on a Saturday morning. David and the other two would always cook the lunch for us, and it was always sausages, mash and baked beans, and the children would help David. And I would go into Yate and take David to Mount Stephen's Bakery, a cafe there. And the manageress got to know us there. And however busy she was, she'd always make a space for Jeremy. And he actually used to drink at that point. That's the other thing I haven't mentioned. He doesn't really drink fluids much, but I used to get him a glass of orange and a donut, and we were always welcomed there. And so this went on for a good while. And then Jeremy also went to school in Stoke Park Hospital, and he was there till 19, and they gave him an extra year till he was 20, and then it closed. And shortly the whole hospital closed down because of the new policy of the government at the time to try and get all disabled people absorbed into the community, which sounds a really good idea in theory, but in practice the homework hadn't been done on it, and these people were very, very vulnerable, and in many cases it didn't work. Their families could be dead or didn't want them, and it was very very difficult to find suitable accommodation. But on the whole, Stoke Park Hospital and places like it, I think they, at that time, had their place for certain people. I think it gave security and a reasonable quality of life to some people who didn't fit into a family or society for one reason or another. And if you went to Stoke Park Hospital on their open day, they were supported by the local people. It was a wonderful day, and you really felt you were part of that community. Jeremy was still under the care of a very good consultant called Dr. Ruth Walters, who was doing research on conditions such as Jeremy's, and I'm afraid I don't know the name of Jeremy's condition. It's a chromosomal abnormality, but it involves various things. The pica condition of eating things is part of it. But she monitored him carefully, and I don't know where her research has led to, and I'm sure she's retired by now, but thank you, Dr. Walters, you were good to us. So Jeremy, he also won an award at a ceremony for progress, and he received a certificate. Unfortunately, he yelled all through the ceremony, which was a bit embarrassing as we were in the front row, but we survive these things. And so we then had to make another move, because David was transferred with the CDB, as it then was, it was still nationalised, up to Cheshire, to Knutsford. And we had to seek somewhere for ourselves and for Jeremy again, so that he could be near us. Although he wasn't living at home with us now, we still had to be in close touch with him. And so we looked around Cheshire, and we were shown several places which we just couldn't face Jeremy being in. And so eventually Dave started working up there, and then we'd already moved. I'll tell you about our house in a minute, but Jeremy was still in Bristol, and we used to go down every Sunday, drive down with a picnic, pick up Jeremy, take him to Clifton Down, give him his picnic, then take him back. It was a long day, and we always went to the same seat on Clifton Downs, And one week somebody else was sitting on it, and Jeremy was absolutely furious. I couldn't ask these people to move. But anyway, he had to put up with that. As long as he got his picnic, he was happy in the end. But they found a place for him in Nantwich. Round the corner, we just found this idyllic cottage. It was a lovely place for Jeremy to live because I could push him. We developed this little small holding and got more and more animals, but we started off with just a couple of sheep, a few chickens, and Jeremy loved the animals. I could push him up the fields. The lane was flat, I could push him along the lane and back, and we used to do this very, very often. I used to sing to him, and he just loved being in the air and seeing the flowers and what was going on around him. He's always loved the fresh air. And so Jeremy, he used to come home twice a week at this time, and as I say, it was an ex-maternity unit, and it wasn't a very auspicious place, but we stayed there for quite a while, and then that place closed, and Jeremy was transferred to a purpose-built bungalow on the edges of Crewe, where there were only a few residents, and the staff were really highly motivated and so enthusiastic. It was within walking distance of the town, and Jeremy settled in there very well indeed. But at this time, David then got transferred back to Gloucestershire. And this was after 8 years in Cheshire, so Jeremy was now in his early 20s. Now, again, we were faced with the problem of finding somewhere in Gloucestershire because Jeremy had gone to Stoke Park, which was in Avon then, and there were no residential places in Gloucestershire at all. But now we came upon a delightful place. Social service had been most helpful. They brought me down when David was at work one day, and we had a look round the Orchard Trust at Lidbrook. And it was in the process of being built. Bungalow 1 was being just about to be occupied, but there were 2 other bungalows and a central atrium, and it was a lovely unit in the most delightful place just above the River Wye. And the social workers that came down with me from Cheshire County Council, they thought it was amazing, going to be great, because it had a little small holding attached to it. So I went back home and said to David what a good place it was. And he was one of the first residents to move into the Orchard Trust. And that's 23 years ago now. And he took to it straight away. And he used to come home every week and stay the day at first. Or he came twice a day at first. But we had bought a small farm and then bought more land. So we finished up with 16 acres. And Jeremy spent a lot of time with us outside, but it was too hilly to push Jeremy all the way, but we still had the fat, tired wheelchair, which did come in useful on the rougher ground. And Jeremy still enjoyed the animals there. Jeremy has such a busy social life at the Orchard Trust that we had difficulty in finding a space for him to come home. He's been on trips, he's been on holidays, he goes to the barn for training of various sorts. And during the course of his life there, the swim gym has been built, the sensory garden, the training centre, and it's altogether an absolutely amazing place. Everybody that goes there says so, and I try to take as many friends as possible. Jeremy's health has been pretty good while he's been at the Orchard Trust. As he's grown older, he's had 1 or 2 serious things happen. He has been hospitalised once or twice, and the staff have shown such care and gone in and looked out for him and visited him. But the main thing that happened to him medically was that his hip gave up, and so he was unable to crawl. That upset us more than Jeremy, it appeared to. Jeremy seemed to cope with being in a wheelchair quite well, really well. The Orchard Trust now has expanded so that they do have respite care, and they have several supported living houses, and they're becoming at last very well known in the area and recommended by everybody for the way they train their staff and the way they treat the staff, and the general the general feeling when you go in there. I always tell people that you could go in there as a visitor at any time without warning, and you would never see anything untoward. You really feel you could do that, and I'm pleased and proud to be able to say that. I'm going to finish, well, by thanking Space for all the happy times Jeremy has had with so many people in his life, so many carers. He spent the longest time of all at the Orchard Trust, half his life, and David and I are incredibly grateful for this, and we wouldn't be able to manage without. And I'm going to finish my chat with a small poem from Jeremy, really, on behalf of Jeremy. It's called Low Mileage. Your feet are not seen in public, but they are so beautiful. Long and elegant toes in 2 quite regular rows. The skin as soft, smooth and white as fresh-laid snow. The soles free of blemishes, cracks and corns. As I sit and massage your feet, ankles and legs, you relax and fall asleep. You do not miss the miles you might have walked, although you nearly made it as a youth. You are content with what you have, the loving care and hugs of family, friends and carers, and you thank them all with your smile.